everybody, I'm James Cebulski. Well, it's been anything but home sweet home on this homestand, but they'll try to finish up with some pride and pick up a W. This city's been buzzing all day, and it's time to see what's up. The Rangers are going to start with the puck after taking the opening draw. And that's a smart heads-up play by Dumba. Moves it quickly over to Hito. Takes the feed.
Rangers are going to be able to find a way to not make the rest of this season miserable. That's my goal here. I know the Rangers have to play a lot of games still, and my hope is that they are not going to waste all of our time down the road. But at the same time, I am also aware that this very well could spiral entirely out of hand. I am entirely aware that this could go the way things went in the spring of 2018 under Alain Vigneault. The problem is that death spiral in 2018 with Ryan Sproul and Rob O'Gara and Neil Pionk and Vladimir Mesnikov and I'm trying to think who else was on that really bad. Cody McLeod was on that team. But Alain Vigneault had the audacity to go out there last day of the season after they had just lost to the Flyers and said, I think I deserve to keep my job. Frankly, I think I did all I could with the team I had. And that is a prevailing idea within the organization. There are a lot of players and a lot of front office people who feel that if they did their best, that's all they can do. And look, in life, in your day to day, that is acceptable. If we're talking about Bob from accounting, if he goes into work every day and does his best, that's acceptable. This is professional sports. You are supposed to be competing to be the best. Not your best, the best. The bar is the best in professional sports, not your best. Now, your goal as a general manager, president of hockey operations, is to assemble as many guys as possible into a roster whose best collectively can be good enough to win something. It is not about your best, Chris Drury. It is about being the best. You know, I keep alluding to the fact that Florida under Bill Zito won the President's Trophy, lost in the first round to Tampa Bay, and said, we need to get better, and took a really calculated and tactical swing in turning Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar into Matthew Tkachuk. The Panthers were rewarded immensely for winning the Stanley Cup and acquiring. They were immensely rewarded by going to a second round, going to a cup final, winning a Stanley Cup. And that is the end goal here. I don't see a world where this permutation of the Rangers is going to be able to do that. Right now, it feels like this is a triage season. And if you're familiar, if you've watched any of the war movies, if you've watched any of the long series like The Pacific or Band of Brothers, you are familiar with the principles of battlefield medicine. Save who you can. Don't waste time on people who are already dead. Ryan Lindgren is not a salvageable hockey player at this point. I am getting close to saying that K'Andre Miller is not a salvageable hockey player at this point. If you move on from both of those guys, and look, I don't think the Rangers are going to move on from K'Andre Miller. I think the more the Rangers struggle this year, I think the more likely it is that they move on from Ryan Lindgren. But let's say hypothetically they were to move on from both K'Andre Miller and Ryan Lindgren in the same offseason. So you're telling me you're going to go into next year with Adam Fox as your only established definitive guy. And we'll put Braden Schneider in there as well. We'll say Schneider and Fox as your only established guys. Borgen's a free agent after this year. Zach Jones, we know they're shopping currently, and that's why he's not in the lineup tonight against Dallas. Lindgren and Miller are out. Vakanainen is probably nothing. Will Borgen is probably nothing. And because of that, you have to fundamentally reevaluate what you're doing here. And the Rangers have had opportunities over the last 3 seasons for some more honest and candid reflections and means of improving their teams. Because frankly, after 2021-2022, when they lose to Tampa Bay in the conference final, they were thoroughly outplayed in every single game of that Tampa Bay series. Go look at the underlying numbers. I don't believe they won a single one of those 6 games on the expected goals. And look, I understand that expected goals are not actual goals, but they are a telltale sign of control of play, of quality of play. And when you think about it, the fact that the Rangers, coming off of a season where Shesterkin won the Vezina with some of the best goalie stats we have seen in the stat tracking era, to double down on that group by making Trouba the captain, by keeping Gaudreau, by keeping Reeves, and look, They got rid of all of those guys within a year and a half, 2 years. They sent Blay back to St. Louis. They sent Reeves to Minnesota. They sent Gaudreau to San Jose. Gaudreau was the longest tenured guy. In Nemeth, they had to burn 2 second-round picks to get rid of. So don't tell me Chris Drury is doing some masterstroke job of assembling a roster. I really don't understand the prevailing sentiment that, well, Chris Drury didn't pick his team. He's been here for 3.5, 4 years now. He's had 4 full off seasons. He had summer 21, summer 22, summer 23, summer 24. He has had 4 off seasons to remodel this roster in his image, and instead he has told you he thinks they are good enough. That's why they're only tinkering around the edges. They think their guys are good enough. That's why they extended Zibanejad. That's why Kreider's still here. That's why they brought in Panarin. That's why they brought in Vincent Trocheck. And as far as Vincent Trocheck, I know there are a lot of people who really like Vincent Trocheck, and I'm aware of the prevalence of the Italian-American community in the greater New York area who think it's amusing that he is so aggressively Italian. It is. It's charming. The hand gestures, the Tommy DeVito stuff, it's cute. It's fun. When the team's winning, it's good for the vibes that whenever the Rangers go to Pittsburgh, they all go to Trocheck's grandma's house and she makes them dinner. That's great. But right now, I don't want to hear about how Trocheck should be the captain. I don't. The Rangers do not have a captain on this team. Fundamentally, they don't. And you could say it's Trocheck, or maybe it's a guy in the next wave like Adam Fox or Will Cooley. But I, for one, would like to see the Rangers stop worrying about nonsense and try and focus on hockey. Because focusing on nonsense is what got them here in the first place. They have made very, very calculated and tactical decisions prioritizing certain types of players. The Ryan Lindgrens of the world, the Will Borgens of the world, guys who are American, who in Borgen's case are big. It's why they drafted Drew Fortescue, because he's big and he's American. It's why they took E.J. Emery, because he's American. And I, for one, know I have the reputation of being very pro player, especially guys like Kakko and Lafreniere. But like, I'm not upset that they traded Kakko. I am upset that they gave up on a guy who was one of like the 6 guys on this team who was actually giving a shit every night. Because you look at where these guys, where some of these guys are in their respective games, and how little effort and how little attention to detail there is. And it's really hard for me to get mad at Kakko for being healthy scratched. You know, you think about where Kakko was in his game 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And I really try to not let my perception of Chris Drury as a person influence what I think about him as a decision maker. But it's very clear that he picks and chooses his favorites, and that's the end of the story. You think about the opportunities that some players have gotten versus some that haven't, and I think it's a really bad look for the organization that in a very short window of time between Lias Andersson, Vitaly Kravtsov, Kaapo Kakko, Nils Lundqvist, you had 4 different guys all get out of here in similar fashion where they weren't valued, they weren't prioritized, the organization gave opportunities to other players they had better suited for those roles. You could go back to during Jeff Gorton's administration. You could talk about the Rangers giving Jimmy Vesey more ice time than Pavel Buchnevich back in 2016-17, 17-18, when those guys were supposed to be the ascending group amongst a new core. You know, in the ideal world, where everything works out for the Rangers last decade, the Rangers go from that Derek Stepan, Ryan McDonough group to the JT Miller, Kevin Hayes, Philip Hedl group. You know, the Rangers ideally tried to line up the passage, the handover of the team from that first wave, you know, the Rick Nash, Derek Stepan, that tier of guy. They tried to line it up where once those guys, their contracts expired, you know, McDonough, Nash, Stepan, who got traded, obviously, traded Brassard to get younger. Once you lined it up, the Rangers clearly thought that even if they were getting older, you know, guys like Stahl, Nash, McDonough, they thought they would be able to hand the team off to the Kevin Hayes, JT Miller, Tony DeAngelo, Philip Hedl wave of players. In my mind, that's what I think Jeff Gorton's first plan was. That, yeah, we might take a short step back in 2018, 2019, but we're still going to have JT Miller. We're going to have Kevin Hayes. We're going to have Matt Zuccarello. We're going to have Chris Kreider. We're going to have Buchnevich. We're going to have Jimmy Vesey. And that wave was supposed to kind of hold it over. But things going as badly as they did in 2017, 2018, where the Rangers weren't in a playoff spot for most of that regular season, that tells me, and I think frankly, that I think the Rangers thought they would be competitive that year. They thought maybe we'll stay in the mix, we'll keep McDonough, we'll keep Rick Nash, and we'll try it again with the young guys trying to take bigger roles. And because that season didn't take the shape they wanted it to, Gorton pivoted to a more long-term, bigger picture approach of, well, let's blow it entirely up. We're going to trade McDonough. We're going to trade JT Miller. We're going to trade Kevin Hayes. We're going to trade Rick Nash. We're going to trade Matt Zuccarello. We are going to start over. We're going to tear this thing down to the studs. We have Vesey. We have Buchnevich. We have Chris Kreider. We have Mika Zibanejad. We are going to build a group around those guys. Our defense, we're going to have to figure out, another NHL fight. Is this Lindgren again? Second Lindgren fight of the simulation, which very funny that Ryan Lindgren, who's perpetually hurt, fights so often in a video game, considering he's, like 5'10", 195 pounds. But nevertheless, I do think the Rangers thought they wouldn't need to blow it up last decade. I think Jeff Gorton thought they would be able to reload and keep attacking. And ultimately, Jeff Gorton's team that he assembled after the letter, it's done the bulk of the work here. You think about everybody who's on the team right now. He acquired Mika Zibanejad. Chris Kreider was Glenn Sather, obviously. Riley Smith's Chris Drury, obviously. Trocheck is Chris Drury. Panarin is Jeff Gorton. Filipino is Jeff Gorton. Will Cooley is Jeff Gorton. Braden Schneider, Adam Fox, Keandre Miller. All of the key, expensive, big contributors, other than Trocheck, are Jeff Gorton guys. And that's why I don't have a lot of empathy for Chris Drury, because he's had 4 off seasons where he could have made decisions, and instead of trying to remodel the team in his image the way he wanted to, he bolted individual pieces onto the team to try and change what was already here into something it wasn't. And that was a foolish endeavor. And some of it's not his fault. I think in an ideal world or a better world, the Rangers find a way to get Jack Eichel in 2021. And maybe Zibanejad is still here, maybe he isn't. But there's a world where the Rangers have Jack Eichel and Philip Hedl down the middle right now. It's their 1-2s. They never need to they don't go and get Trocheck because Hedl doesn't get hurt. So he's able to really carve out a niche for himself as the second best center on the team. They still have Kreider. They still have Panarin. They have Panarin, Eichel, Kreider as their best 3 forwards. They still have Adam Fox. Maybe they go after someone like Riley Smith in that tier of guys. But I think, frankly, the Rangers' big issue and why I understood why they signed Vincent Trocheck, and I know Trocheck's a better player than Ryan Strome, but the reason I was against the Vincent Trocheck signing in principle is that it was making the team older and it was shortening the window. Vincent Trocheck, he's over 30 now. And I don't think the Rangers have gotten bad value on the first 2 seasons of his contract. He was great last year. He had a career year last year on the best line on the team and one of the best lines in all of the NHL. But the simple matter of the fact is, every time you bring in somebody on the older side of things, whether it's Jonathan Quick, whether it's Vincent Trocheck, whether it's Blake Wheeler, it's Eric Gustafsson, you are taking away opportunities from younger players who could have solved your problem in-house. And look, I understand that they didn't want to go into the 22-23 season with Hedl as the 2C because, frankly, they didn't trust him. I know a lot of people have fond memories of the kid line in the 22 playoffs, and I do as well. I think, frankly, they were often the team's most consistent line. I might go do a little investigation on that, go under the hood on Natural Stat Trick and compare the lines during those playoffs. But there has been ample opportunity here for the Rangers to make decisions ahead of time, to be preventative, and they've been reactive. They have prioritized continuity at the expense of improving the team. And now if you're sitting here as Chris Drury, and I know Andrew immediately jumped in and said, well, they're not going to trade Lafreniere now. And I'm not saying, he misunderstood what I was saying. I was saying the worst case scenario was that the Rangers sell low on their guys, whether that's Hedel, whether that's Keandre Miller, whether that's Alexi Lafreniere, because all of these guys are pretty close to negative, not negative, but their lowest value. You know, Keandre Miller right now has cost himself a lot of money this season with the way he's played. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if the Rangers did a 1-year deal off of his RFA stuff because they don't think they can give him a long-term contract. And frankly, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving Keandre Miller a long-term contract because of the steps back he's made in his game. You know, I am firmly of the opinion that if the Rangers are going to win the Stanley Cup, Keandre Miller is going to be like the focal point, the swing point. You know, you think about these teams that win the Stanley Cup and that number 3 defenseman, not on the first pair, but their first guy on that second pair. That's often the guy who can swing games for a team because of their defensive impact. And in case of someone like Miller, with their skating, they're going to be able to do more. But the year and a half he's had, dating back to the playoffs last year to the present, I have been very concerned with his play. We did a breakdown of his game last month. It's on our YouTube channel on Liberty Blue. But underlying numbers are concerning. The possession stats are concerning. The quality of play is concerning. His skating has gotten better. He's faster if you look at his NHL Edge stats. But, oh God, this is such an ugly game of Chell. My goodness, this game. This is kind of what I expect from a lineup that's going to have like 4 guys who should be in the AHL. And like, all due respect to Will Borgen, to Matt Rempe. Good Lord, that's a nice short side goal. I wonder if the computer's going to put Shesterkin back in for Quick. I almost just said Lundqvist in for Quick. But at this point, if you're still watching the stream, first of all, thank you. You're a real sicko. It's not like anyone's getting any work done. It's 4 o'clock on the Friday before, I almost said Thanksgiving, the Friday before Christmas. But I like doing these game day streams because they're good for my subconscious, and this is free as opposed to therapy, which is expensive. My copay is a lot. But when you think about things, your goal, if you're going to watch this game against the Stars tonight, which I highly encourage you don't, watch Indiana Notre Dame in the college football playoff, watch basketball, watch a different hockey game. If you are going to watch this game, don't have high expectations. Hope for the Rangers to not get obliterated the way they are in the simulation right now. But you do have some things to look at. How does Borgen play? Who does he play with? They're saying Schneider's going to play on his left. Borgen's going to be on the right. Borgen's right-handed. He's 6'3". He's like 210 pounds. He's an above-average skater. He's 80th percentile for amongst defensemen in most skating attributes according to the NHL's database. But his puck skills, he shoots the puck probably a little bit more than you want for somebody in his mix. But the one argument in favor of Borgen, if you are curious, he's playing a lot more minutes this year than he probably should. You know, I think he had the 6th most minutes of all Kraken at 5-on-5. He hasn't played with particularly good defensive partners either. So I'm not saying Schneider is some great player, but Schneider's better than anyone he's played with in Seattle this year. So maybe you give him a little bit less to do. You play him a little bit less. You maybe make his workload a little bit easier in terms of ice time. But he hasn't really played a ton of quality competition, and he's got bad underlying numbers, which is kind of why I'm not as enthusiastic about this move in the aggregate as I probably would have been, say, last summer. You know, if they'd done this trade in the summer off the year Borgen had last year, I probably would have been a little more interested in it. But at the same time, we'll see. The potential for Borgen to be functional should be enticing. You have the opportunity of somebody like Rempe coming back in. I am sure he will get into an unnecessary fight relatively early in this game because he's going to want to prove to the organization and his teammates that he wants to be there. He has not played well in the AHL since being sent back down. I understand the novelty. I beg of you, if you are listening to my voice right now, do not eat the cheese. Do not get distracted. You are allowed to like Matt Rempe, the hockey player. You are allowed to find it fun. But the Rangers are hoping that bringing the sideshow back will distract everyone from how poorly the team is playing. And that is frustrating to me because it is condescending and frankly insulting for the organization to line up an objectively bad team and then ask you to spend $180 per person. And I know there are people who've been watching the stream the entire time who are going to be like, Nick, why do you keep bringing up that it's $180 to go to a game? You don't have to go. I know that. I'm not. I'm not giving the Rangers my money. If I want to see them, maybe I'll go see them play at Prudential or on Long Island because I'm so sick of this team. But they are going to try and pretend everything is fine. They are going to trade Zach Jones for nothing. They'll trade Jimmy Vesey for nothing. And they're going to pretend that they're trying their best to win the Stanley Cup this year on a defense with 4 AHL caliber players. And look, when Miller comes back, I imagine somebody of that grouping of Ruedel, Borgen, and Vakanainen's coming out. That's not exactly a surprise unless they were to trade Miller for some reason. But I don't think they would do that because his value's so low. Unless it was a frustration trade. And it's not out of the question that Drury makes another frustration trade the same way he did Kakko. As much as the Rangers want to pretend that Kakko coming out and saying it was bullshit, he was healthy scratched, wasn't the reason he was traded, it is. You cannot tell me with a straight face that Chris Drury particularly is sentimental or cares about what guys think or how valuable they are. But at the same time, you embarrass the organization, that's not going to fly. And I think the simple matter of the fact is they wanted to make an example out of him, that they wanted everyone to fall in line. I think that's the same reason you saw Vincent Trocheck make a point of addressing the media and saying, no, our behind closed doors meeting wasn't about Chris Drury. Vincent Trocheck has every incentive in the world to lie. He is Chris Drury's signature decision as Rangers general manager. There's a world where Vincent Trocheck ends up the next captain of this team. All of that said, I don't trust Trocheck's. There is no reason for me to trust what Vincent Trocheck says. He has every reason to try and lie, to bring down the temperature, to diffuse the situation, and try and bring the attention back to the hockey. The problem is the hockey is arguably worse than the behind-the-scenes stuff. And that's the parting thought I want to leave you with. There's 6 minutes to go in the simulation. I'm going to end this. I'll go to the gym, and then I'll sit down and watch this BS. But what do you think is worse if you're listening to the stream, if you're watching the stream right now? Do you think the behind the scenes stuff is worse? Or do you think the fact they're tied for last in the Metropolitan division after being 2 games away from the Cup final is worse? Because there's a real argument either way. I personally think the on-ice product is so bad for what they expect us to think of them that I would say the on-ice product is worse than what the behind-the-scenes stuff is. And look, the behind-the-scenes stuff it's concerning. You know, I joke all the time that the last time the Rangers head of content creation or digital, I forget what exactly it was titled. I think it was social media creation or social media strategist, whatever. The last time that job was listed on LinkedIn, the salary was $43,000. The Rangers are a $4.5 to $5 billion organization, and they are paying a social media manager $43,000 a year. They expect you to live in New York. You can't travel with the team. You can't be friendly with players on the team to be able to make connections, to be able to produce good content because of something that happened. Because I think the Rangers have real communication issues, and frankly, I think they have real culture issues. I think some of that stems to Madison Square Garden at large. I know people are familiar with James Dolan's lawsuit, Isaiah Thomas, when he was accused of sexual misconduct when he was with the Knicks, and then James Dolan made him like the general manager of the Liberty, I think, or the coach of the Liberty during that period of time. I know there are real issues there. I know James Dolan is a vindictive person, you know, that those lawyers who tried to go to Radio City last year for the Christmas show got picked up on the facial recognition software, and because they were part of a lawsuit against Madison Square Garden, they were not allowed into the show. And the Rangers, the Knicks, the MSG properties, you know, I think that's the Beacon, Radio City, and Madison Square Garden. They all use facial recognition software, which is illegal, by the way, and you're not allowed to do, but they've gotten around that through some workarounds and some security causes. But I, for one, am kind of enjoying being right. It's a curse to know what you're talking about in the world right now. You know, there's a real assault on expertise in all walks of life. You know, if you're even vaguely familiar, if you read the news poorly, to quote George Carlin, you can understand there is a real widespread backlash against anybody perceived to be part of systems, to be knowledgeable, because people feel like the world is BSing them, that they are not getting the change they want. They are not getting the quality of living that they're expecting. And look, sports are a first world problem. I am fully aware that I should be worried about bigger things than Zach Jones not being in the lineup so they could play Chad Ruweedle. I understand that. I am capable of both. But at the same time, the Rangers are asking us to pretend everything is fine. This is Sam Rosen's last season, the great voice, friend of the program, one of the nicest people you will ever have the pleasure of meeting if you ever are afforded the opportunity. And this hockey team can't be bothered to try most nights. They cannot be bothered to put a modicum of effort in towards playing good hockey. And it's really depressing for me that Sam Rosen's probably going out like this. Look, I'll leave you with this. There's a minute left in the game. I won't drag on that much longer because the game simulation has gone slow. There's been a ton of stoppages because it's such a high scoring game on one side. But there are 50 something games remaining. The Rangers have a really difficult next block of 12, 13 games. They got the Devils twice, the Stars twice, including tonight, Vegas, Colorado. They've got a really rough gambit of games. And if they are still, seventh, even sixth in the Metro in mid-January, I think there's a real chance that something biblical happens, whether that's everybody getting fired, whether that's a franchise-altering trade like trading Kreider or something. I do think the longer that this dwells on, the volatility of the situation will continue to increase, and that should give everybody massive amounts of pause. When you think about a big fire, eventually the fire has to burn out. It runs out of energy and it dies. Right now, the Rangers, I won't say are at the apex of their fire, but it feels like we are reaching a tipping point of which there is no return. The burn the boats, the crossing the Rubicon, whatever verbiage you want to use, whatever metaphor you want to use for the situation, the predicament they're in. The Rangers are in dire straits. They need to start winning hockey games against good teams after losing to bad teams. And they are in eighth place in the Metro after having a relatively easy schedule the first few weeks, months of the season. They've been very fortunate with the opponents they've had, and that's over. Tonight, Dallas, this is a Stanley Cup caliber team, even with Sagan out, even with the injuries they have. Dallas is Stanley Cup caliber. The Rangers might not even be playoff caliber. But that'll do it for the stream today. I will attempt to get a stream up for the 22nd and the 23rd against the Devils. I will talk to you guys for sure on Monday. Andrew and I will have our normal episode. It might be earlier in the day. It might be right after Rangers Devils ends. We'll talk about it over the weekend and try and come to a decision as far as timing. To everyone who stopped by the stream today, thank you. Appreciate it. Hope I was able to keep you